Admiral Kithra pressed her fingers against the cold metal of her command chair as the massive ship dropped out of hyperspace. The stars around them changed from streaks of light back to points of brightness. After traveling faster than light for 3 days, they had finally reached the Zarian system. The bridge of the Eternal Dominion was quiet except for the soft hum of computers. Kithra looked around at her crew. Each one sat at their station, watching their screens with careful eyes. She had commanded this ship for 15 years. Her crew knew their jobs well. Admiral called out Lieutenant Vex from his sensor station. "We are picking up something strange ahead." Kithra stood up from her chair and walked to the main viewing screen. "Show me." The screen flickered to life. In the distance, she could see flashes of light. Weapons fire. A battle was happening in space near the 4th planet of this system. 2 different groups of ships are fighting, Vex reported. "I've never seen designs like these before." That was impossible. The Hegemony Empire had ruled this part of space for 3,000 years. Their computers held information about every known species, every planet, every type of ship. Nothing should be unknown to them. "Bring us closer," Kithra ordered. "But keep us hidden behind that moon." The ship moved forward slowly. As they got closer, the sensors picked up more details about the battle. One group of ships was much smaller than the other. The smaller ships looked crude and simple. They used basic weapons that fired metal chunks at high speed. Their engines left bright trails of fire behind them. The other ships were different. They looked like they were made of crystal or glass. They glowed with strange colors that hurt to look at directly. Their weapons were beams of pure energy that could cut through metal like it was paper. "The smaller ships are losing badly," reported Commander Thane from the tactical station. "They are outnumbered 5 to 1. Their weapons barely scratched the crystal ships." Kithra watched the battle unfold on the screen. The small ships fought with desperate courage. When their weapons failed, they rammed into enemy ships. When their engines were damaged, they used emergency thrusters to keep fighting. She had seen many battles in her time, but this was different. These unknown beings fought like wild animals backed into a corner. "Can we pick up any communications?" she asked. "Yes, Admiral. The smaller ships are sending messages to each other. Our computers are working to translate them now." A few minutes later, words began to appear on the screen. The translation was rough, but Kithra could understand enough. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the U Santiago. My engines are gone. I'm going to ram that crystal ship. Tell Earth we did our best. Captain, this is Admiral Chun. Fall back to defensive positions. We need to protect the colony ships. No retreat. These things will follow us home. We stop them here, or everyone dies." Earth. That was the name of their home planet. Kithra had never heard of it. Her mind raced. In 3,000 years of empire expansion, they had never found a species they did not already know about. "Sir," Vex called out again. "I'm reading the name of their species from their ship computers. They call themselves humans." Humans. Another unknown word. On the screen, the battle was reaching its end. The crystal ships had destroyed most of the human fleet. Only a few ships were left, and they were badly damaged. But they kept fighting. One human ship, much larger than the others, was trying to protect what looked like civilian vessels. These must be the colony ships the Admiral had mentioned. They were slow and had no weapons. "The crystal ships are moving to attack the civilian vessels," Thane reported. Kithra watched as the human warships threw themselves between the crystal ships and the helpless colony vessels. They fired everything they had. They used their own ships as shields. Some captains even set their reactors to explode, taking crystal ships with them when they died. But it was not enough. One by one, the human ships died. The crystal ships moved in and destroyed the colony vessels without mercy. Men, women, and children died in flashes of light. "My God," whispered Dr. Zephan, the ship's science officer. "They're killing everyone. No mercy, no prisoners. Complete extinction." The last human ship exploded in a ball of fire. The battle was over. The crystal ships began to move away, heading toward the edge of the system. They moved in perfect formation, like a school of fish or a flock of birds. "Follow those crystal ships," Kithra ordered. "But stay far back. Do not let them detect us." "Admiral," Vex said slowly, "I am picking up more transmissions. The crystal ships are sending data somewhere. It looks like a report. A report to who?" "Unknown, sir. The signal is going out of the system. Very long range." Kithra felt a chill run down her spine. If the crystal ships were reporting to someone, that meant there were more of them. Maybe many more. And if they could destroy humans so easily, what would happen if they found other species? What would happen if they found the Empire? "But would Empire?" "Pull up everything our sensors recorded about this battle," she commanded. "I want to know everything about both of these species. How they fight. What their technology can do. Everything." "Yes, Admiral." She looked at the empty space where the human fleet had died. These humans had fought bravely against impossible odds. They had died protecting their families and their people. And until today, the Empire had never known they existed. "Set course for Imperial Command," she said finally. "Maximum speed. The Council needs to know about this immediately." As the Eternal Dominion turned away from the battlefield, Kithra could not stop thinking about what she had seen. For 3,000 years, the Empire had believed they knew everything about their part of the galaxy. They had been wrong. Somewhere out there, crystal ships were hunting species the Empire had never heard of. And somewhere else, there might be more humans who did not know that death was coming for them. The Empire's perfect knowledge was broken. And Admiral Kithra had the feeling that everything was about to change. 3 hours had passed since the battle ended. Admiral Kithra stood in the science lab of the Eternal Dominion, watching Dr. Zephan analyze the recordings they had made. The lab was filled with screens showing different parts of the fight from many angles. "Show me that part again," Kithra said, pointing at one screen. When the human ship rammed the crystal vessel, Dr. Zephan touched his controls. The screen showed a small human warship with half its hull torn away. Atmosphere was leaking out in white clouds. The ship should have been dead in space. Instead, it turned toward the nearest crystal ship and fired its engines. "Look at the engine signature," Zephan said. "They are using pure fusion rockets. Very basic technology. These humans barely have the ability to travel between stars." The human ship hit the crystal vessel at tremendous speed. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire and metal. For a moment, the crystal ship's strange glow flickered and died. "But they can hurt the crystal ships," Kithra noted. "That's important." "Yes, but look at the cost. They had to destroy themselves to damage just one enemy ship. And the crystal ships have hundreds in their fleet." On another screen, they watched a different part of the battle. A human ship called the UES Moscow was surrounded by 3 crystal vessels. Its weapons were gone. Its engines were failing. But the crew kept fighting with whatever they had left. The ship's communications were still being transmitted. Kithra listened to the translated voices of the human crew. "Captain, we've lost main power. Life support is failing. Keep fighting, Lieutenant. My daughter is on Earth. These things are not getting past us." "Sir, we could try to surrender. Have you seen them take prisoners? They kill everyone. We fight until we die." The Moscow lasted another 10 minutes before it was destroyed. During that time, It managed to damage 2 crystal ships with emergency weapons and small fighter craft that attacked like angry insects. "Remarkable," Dr. Zephan said quietly. "I have studied warfare for 40 years. I have never seen anything like this." "What do you mean?" "Most species, when they are clearly beaten, will try to surrender or escape. These humans refuse to do either. Look at this data." Zephan brought up a tactical display showing the movements of all the human ships during the battle. Red lines showed where each ship had moved and fought. Every single human ship fought until it was destroyed. Not one tried to run away. Not one asked for mercy. They all died fighting to protect those colony ships. Kithara studied the display. "What about their technology? Can you tell me more about that?" "Very primitive by our standards. They use chemical explosives and metal projectiles for weapons. Their fastest ships can barely reach 1/10 the speed of light. Their armor is just thick metal plates. But they made it to space. They have faster than light travel. Yes, that's the strange part. Their jump drive technology is actually quite advanced. Almost as good as ours. But everything else is hundreds of years behind what it should be." On the main screen, they watched the final moments of the battle again. The last human ship was a massive vessel that the others had called a carrier. It was trying to protect the civilian colony ships when the crystal vessels closed in. "That large ship," Kithara said. "What can you tell me about it?" "The U.S. Yorktown. It carried smaller fighter craft inside it. When the crystal ships got close, it released over 200 tiny ships. They watched as swarms of small human fighters poured out of the carrier like angry bees from a hive. Each fighter was no bigger than a shuttle, with just 1 or 2 crew members. They had simple weapons and basic armor. "This is suicide," one of Kithara's officers said. "Those fighters cannot hurt the crystal ships." But the fighters did not try to hurt the crystal ships directly. Instead, they worked together in groups. Some fighters distracted the enemy, while others attacked from behind. When their weapons ran out, they rammed into crystal ship weapons and engines. "They are using pack hunting tactics," Dr. Zephan observed. "Like wolves taking down a much larger animal." The fighter swarms managed to disable several crystal ships before they were all destroyed. But there were too many enemies. Eventually, the crystal ships broke through and destroyed the carrier and the colony vessels it was protecting. "How many humans died in this battle?" Kithara asked. Zephan checked his numbers. "Approximately 50,000 military personnel. The colony ships held another 200,000 civilians. All dead. 250,000 people had died in just a few hours. And somewhere out there, more humans lived on their home planet, completely unaware that these crystal ships existed." "Admiral," Lieutenant Vex called from the bridge through the communication system. "You need to see this. We're getting reports from other Imperial ships." Kithara and Dr. Zephan hurried back to the bridge. On the main screen, a map showed their region of space. Red markers were appearing at several locations. 3 more Imperial patrols have reported similar battles, Vex explained. Crystal ships attacking primitive species. Always the same pattern. Complete destruction of the defending forces. When did these attacks happen? All within the past week, Admiral. The crystal ships are moving fast and hitting multiple targets. Kithara felt her stomach turn cold. This was not a random raid or an accident. The crystal ships were conducting an organized campaign of destruction against young species. Do we know anything about the species they attacked? Very little. Most of them were so primitive that we had not made contact with them yet. Like the humans, they were not in our records. On the screen, the red markers continued to multiply as more reports came in. The crystal ships were attacking all along the outer edge of Imperial space, targeting species that had just learned to travel between stars. Dr. Zephan, Kithara said. I want you to analyze all the data we have on these attacks. Find out what these crystal ships want. Why are they targeting young species? Yes, Admiral. And I want a full report on human technology and tactics. If more of these attacks happen, we need to understand how different species fight back. Kithra looked at the star map again. The pattern was becoming clear. The crystal ships were not random raiders or pirates. They were systematic hunters, targeting species that had just reached space but were not yet advanced enough to defend themselves properly. The humans had fought better than most, but they had still been destroyed completely. If these crystal ships continued their attacks, dozens of young species would die before they had a chance to grow and develop. And Kithra could not shake the feeling that the crystal ships were just getting started. The question that worried her most was simple. After they finished with the young species, what would they do next? 5 days after the Zarian battle, Admiral Kithra sat in the war room of the Eternal Dominion. The walls were covered with screens showing star maps, battle reports, and intelligence data. What she saw made her feel sick. 17 systems attacked in the past week, reported Commander Thane, standing next to a large display. Always the same pattern. Crystal ships appear, destroy all defending forces, then disappear. The room was filled with her senior officers. Everyone looked worried. In all their years of service, nothing like this had ever happened before. Tell me about the species they attacked, Kithra said. Dr. Zafan stepped forward with a data pad in his hands. Most were unknown to us before these attacks. All were young spacefaring civilizations. The most advanced had been traveling between stars for maybe 50 years, and they were all destroyed completely? Every one. No survivors found. No colonies left alive. Complete extinction in every case. Lieutenant Vex activated another screen. Admiral, we have identified the crystal ship's movement pattern. They are not attacking randomly. The screen showed a three-dimensional map of their region of space. Red lines connected the attack sites, showing the path the crystal ships had taken. They started at the edge of the galaxy and moved inward, Vex explained. They hit the youngest species first, then worked their way toward more advanced civilizations. How long before they reached the Empire's core worlds? Kithra asked. At their current speed, maybe 6 months. But Admiral, there's something else. We detected their ships scanning other systems. They are looking for something specific. Commander Thane brought up sensor recordings from one of their patrol ships. The Iron Resolve was able to observe a crystal ship fleet for several hours before they jumped away. Watch this. The recording showed a group of crystal ships moving slowly through a star system. They sent out scanning beams toward each planet. When they found a world with life, they would scan it more carefully. They're looking for young civilizations, Dr. Zephan said. Species that have just learned to travel in space but are not yet powerful enough to defend themselves properly. Why? Asked Captain Torres from the Marine Division. What do they gain from destroying young species? We don't know yet. But we have learned more about their technology. Dr. Zephan activated a new display showing technical details about the crystal ships. Their vessels exist partially outside normal space. That's why they glow and look strange. They can attack from directions that should not be possible. What does that mean for fighting them? Kithra asked. It means our shields and armor might not work properly. They can hit us from angles we cannot defend against. And their weapons ignore most types of protection. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. The Empire's military had always been the strongest in known space. But these crystal ships had technology that could make their advantages meaningless. There's more, Beck said quietly. We intercepted some of their communications after the latest attack. Our computers were able to translate parts of it. He played an audio recording. Strange sounds filled the room, like crystal bells ringing underwater. Slowly, words appeared on the screen as the computer translated. Harvest in Sector 7 complete. Species 2847 eliminated. Moving to next target zone. No significant resistance encountered. Species 2847, Dr. Zephyr repeated. They are numbering the civilizations they destroy. The humans were just a number to them. Kithra felt anger growing in her chest. She had watched the humans fight with incredible courage, dying to protect their families and colonies. To the crystal ships, those brave people were just another number on a list. Do we know how many species they plan to attack? She asked. No, Admiral. But based on their scanning patterns, they are looking for every young civilization in this region of space. Captain Torres leaned forward. Admiral, we need to warn the species in their path. Give them time to prepare or evacuate. Most of them don't have the technology to receive our messages, Thane replied. And even if they could, where would they go? The crystal ships are faster than anything these young species can build. On the main screen, Vex brought up a list of species that were likely targets for the crystal ships. Kithra read through the names. Most were civilizations the Empire had observed from a distance, but never contacted. They were too primitive to be useful as trade partners or allies. The Kalari Republic, she read out loud. Population 4 billion. They achieved faster than light travel 3 years ago. The crystal ships will reach their system in 8 days, Vex reported. The Vraxan Commonwealth. Population 7 billion. First interstellar colony established last year. 12 days for the crystal ships to reach them. Kithra continued reading. Dozens of species. Billions of lives. All marked for destruction by creatures that saw them as nothing more than numbers. Admiral, Dr. Zephyr said carefully, there is something else we need to discuss. The crystal ships are not just targeting random young species. They are specifically looking for civilizations that have reached a certain level of development. What level? Species that have just begun to spread to other star systems. The ones that are no longer limited to a single planet, but are not yet strong enough to defend themselves properly. The implications hit Kithra like a physical blow. They're preventing young species from growing up, stopping them before they can become powerful. It appears so, yes. But why? What threat could these young species possibly be to creatures this advanced? We don't know. But Admiral, there's something that worries me even more. Dr. Zephyr brought up historical data about the Empire itself. 3,000 years ago, when our civilization was young, we were exactly like these species the crystal ships are attacking now. We had just learned to travel between stars. We had spread to a few dozen colonies. Are you saying these crystal ships attacked us back then? I'm saying we don't know why we survived when so many others didn't. Maybe we were lucky. Maybe we were hidden. Or maybe someone protected us. The war room became very quiet. Everyone was thinking about the same thing. If the crystal ships had been doing this for thousands of years, how many civilizations had they destroyed? How many species had been wiped out before they could grow and develop? Admiral, Vex said urgently. Incoming message from Imperial Command. Priority 1. The main screen changed to show the face of Grand Admiral Vorthek, the highest military commander in the Empire. He looked worried. Admiral Kithra, your report about the crystal ships has caused great concern at the highest levels of government. You are ordered to return to Imperial Command immediately for a full briefing. Sir, with respect, we are tracking the crystal ships' movements. We could provide advance warning to their next targets. And do what? We are not in contact with most of these species. And even if we were, our intervention could expose the Empire to attack by these crystal ships. Kithra felt frustration building inside her. Sir, Billions of people are going to die. That is unfortunate, Admiral. But the Empire's first duty is to protect its own citizens. Set course for Imperial Command. That is an order. The transmission ended. Kithara stared at the blank screen, her hands clenched into fists. Admiral, Commander Thane said quietly, your orders? She looked around the room at her officers. These were good people who had served the Empire faithfully for years. They had sworn oaths to protect Imperial citizens and follow Imperial orders, but she kept thinking about the human ship captains who had died protecting their colony vessels. They had made a different choice when faced with impossible odds. Set course for Imperial Command, she said finally, but continue monitoring the crystal ship's movements. I want to know exactly where they go and when they get there. As her officers began to carry out her orders, Kithara made a decision. She would report to Imperial Command as ordered. She would give them all the information they wanted about the crystal ships, but she was also going to find out why the Empire had survived when so many other young civilizations had died, and if there was a way to help the species that were still marked for death, she was going to find it. Dr. Zephan walked through the ancient halls of the Imperial Archives on the planet Primarch. The building was older than the Empire itself, carved from black stone that had been quarried when their civilization was young. Few people came here anymore. Most of the Empire's knowledge was stored in computers now, but some knowledge was too old for computers. Some secrets had been written on stone tablets and metal sheets, thousands of years before electronic storage existed. Admiral Kithara had given him a secret mission while she reported to Imperial Command. Find out why the Empire had survived when so many other young species had been destroyed by the Vermai crystal ships. The archives contained the oldest records of their civilization. Stories from the time when their ancestors had first reached for the stars. Dr. Zephan had spent 3 days searching through dusty rooms and forgotten storage areas. Finally, in the deepest level of the building, he found what he was looking for. The chamber was small and cold. Ancient writing covered the walls from floor to ceiling. Most of it was in old languages that few people could read anymore. But Dr. Zephan was a scientist. He had studied the old tongues as part of his research. The writing told a story that had been almost forgotten. Long ago, when the Empire's ancestors had just learned to travel between stars, they were not alone. Dozens of other young species were spreading across the galaxy at the same time. They traded with each other. They shared knowledge. They built a community of growing civilizations. Then the Crystal Plague came. That was what the old records called it. Ships made of living crystal that appeared from the dark spaces between galaxies. They came in vast numbers, and they brought only death. Dr. Zephan read the ancient words with growing horror. The Crystal Plague attacked every young species they could find. No mercy, no prisoners. Complete extinction. Just like what was happening now. But the young species did not die quietly. They fought back. The records spoke of a great alliance. 37 different species joined together to fight the Crystal Plague. They shared their best weapons and their strongest warriors. They learned to work as one people instead of many separate civilizations. The war lasted for over 100 years. Dr. Zephan found detailed descriptions of battles fought across thousands of star systems. Young species throwing everything they had against an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. Ships that fought until they were nothing but floating metal. Worlds that chose to destroy themselves rather than be harvested by the crystal entities. Most of the Alliance species died. Their names were carved into memorial walls that filled entire chambers in the deepest parts of the archives. Civilizations that had shown promise were reduced to empty worlds and silent space. But they won. Somehow, the Alliance managed to drive the Crystal Plague back into the dark spaces beyond the galaxy's edge. The surviving records were not clear about how they did it. The knowledge of their victory had been lost over the centuries. What Dr. Zephyr found next made his hand shake as he read it. The cost of victory had been terrible. Of the 37 species that joined the Alliance, only 4 survived the war. The ancestors of the Empire were one of those 4. They were the youngest of the Alliance members, protected by their older allies who died to give them time to grow strong. The last entry in the memorial chamber was a promise carved in stone. It was written in the common language the Alliance had developed, translated into each surviving species' native tongue. We who remain swear by the memory of those who died that we will not forget their sacrifice. If the crystal plague returns, we will stand ready. No young species will face extinction alone while we have strength to fight. Dr. Zephyr sat down heavily on the ancient stone floor. The Empire had forgotten. 3,000 years of peace and prosperity had erased the memory of their debt to the species that had died to protect them. The crystal ships were not invaders or raiders. They were the same crystal plague that had nearly destroyed the galaxy before. They had returned from whatever dark place the Alliance had driven them to, and they were starting their harvest again. He activated his portable communicator and sent an encrypted message to Admiral Kithra on the secured channel she had given him. Admiral, I have found the answer. The crystal ships are an ancient threat that our ancestors faced before. They are called the Crystal Plague. They harvest young civilizations periodically, like farmers gathering crops. Our species survived the last harvest because other civilizations died to protect us. He paused, looking at the memorial walls covered with the names of extinct species. Admiral, the Empire exists today only because 33 other civilizations sacrificed themselves to give us time to grow strong. We owe our lives to the dead. While he waited for a reply, Dr. Zephyr continued exploring the memorial chamber. He found technical information about the crystal plague that the Alliance had discovered during their long war. The crystal entities were not truly alive in any way that made sense. They were something like living machines, created by forces that existed before the galaxy formed. They saw young civilizations as a threat to galactic stability. When a species learned to travel between stars, they triggered some kind of ancient detection system. The crystal plague would then arrive to eliminate the threat before it could grow too large. But there was something else in the records, something that gave Dr. Zephyr hope. The Alliance had learned to fight back. They had discovered weapons and tactics that could hurt the crystal entities. Most importantly, they had learned that the crystal plague could be stopped if young species worked together. Instead of fighting alone, the humans he had watched die at Zarian had fought with incredible courage. But they had fought alone, with primitive weapons and no allies. If they had known what they were facing, if they had been part of a larger alliance, they might have survived. His communicator buzzed with Admiral Kithra's reply. Dr. Zephyr, your findings confirm what I suspected. The Imperial Council is debating whether to ignore the crystal plague or fight them. Most members want to stay hidden and hope the plague passes us by. Admiral, hiding will not work. The records here are clear. Once the crystal plague finishes with the young species, they will come for us. They always do. Can you find anything about how to fight them? Dr. Zephyr looked around the memorial chamber. Somewhere in these ancient records was the knowledge their ancestors had used to win the last war. He just had to find it. I'm searching now. But Admiral, there's something else. The alliance that defeated the crystal plague before was made up of many species. They won because they worked together. If we fight alone, we will lose. The humans are gone. Most of the other young species will be dead within weeks. Not all of them. Some species are hidden in distant systems. Some have colonies that the crystal plague hasn't found yet. If we could gather them together, teach them what we know about fighting these entities, Dr. Zephan stopped typing and stared at the promise carved on a memorial wall. The words seemed to glow in the dim light of the chamber. Admiral, our ancestors swore an oath. They promised that no young species would face extinction alone while they had strength to fight. The Empire has forgotten that promise. Maybe it's time to remember. He began taking detailed photos of every inscription in the memorial chamber. Everything their ancestors had learned about fighting the Crystal Plague needed to be preserved and studied. The Empire had been given 3,000 years to grow strong because other species had died for them. Now, it was their turn to decide what that strength would be used for. Dr. Zephan hoped they would make the right choice. But first, he had to find the knowledge that could give them a chance to win. Admiral Kithara stood before the Emergency Council of the Hegemony Empire in the Great Hall of Imperial Command. The chamber was enormous, with seats for 200 council members arranged in a circle around the speaking platform. Today, every seat was filled. The council members wore their formal robes of office, decorated with symbols showing their rank and the worlds they represented. Most of them looked old and comfortable. These were people who had known only peace and prosperity their entire lives. Admiral Kithara, said High Chancellor Vec from his elevated chair, you have brought disturbing reports about these crystal ships. Tell the council what you recommend we do. Kithara had prepared for this moment during the long journey from the outer systems. She had reviewed Dr. Zephan's findings from the archives. She knew what she had to say, even though many council members would not want to hear it. Honored council members, she began, the crystal ships are not raiders or invaders. They are an ancient threat that our ancestors called the Crystal Plague. They have returned to harvest young civilizations, just as they did 3,000 years ago. Murmurs of surprise and worry rippled through the chamber. Most council members had never heard of the Crystal Plague. The old stories had been forgotten over the centuries. According to the ancient records, Kithara continued, our civilization survived the last harvest only because 33 other species sacrificed themselves to protect us. They formed an alliance and fought a war that lasted over 100 years. Most of them died so that we could live. Councillor Neth, an elderly woman who represented the core industrial worlds, stood up. Even if this is true, Admiral, what does it have to do with us now? These other species are primitives. They have nothing to offer the Empire. They have their lives to offer, Kithara replied. And those lives have value. Value to whom? Demanded Councillor Torvin from the military committee. They cannot defend themselves. They cannot help us. Why should we risk Imperial lives for people who mean nothing to our security? Kithara had expected this argument. Many council members thought only in terms of power and advantage. They had forgotten that the Empire itself had once been weak and helpless. Because it is the right thing to do, she said simply. And because our ancestors swore an oath that we would not let young species face extinction alone. High Chancellor Vec raised his hand for silence. Admiral, you have shown us ancient history, but we must deal with the present. What do you propose? Kithara activated a holographic display that showed the current positions of Imperial fleets and the projected path of the crystal ships. The Crystal Plague is systematically destroying every young species in this region of space. In 2 weeks, they will reach the Sol System, home of the humans. The human homeworld contains 8 billion people. All of them will die unless someone helps them. And you want us to be that someone, said Councillor Neth. I want us to remember who we are. Our ancestors were protected by an alliance of species who believed that young civilizations deserved a chance to grow. Now we are the strong ones. It is our turn to protect others. Councillor Torvin stood again. Admiral, you are asking us to start a war with beings whose technology may be superior to ours. You are asking us to risk millions of Imperial lives for people who do not even know we exist. I am asking us to honor the debt we owe to the dead." The chamber erupted in arguments. Some council members supported Kithra's position. They believed the Empire had a moral duty to help the threatened species. Others argued that the Empire's first responsibility was to protect its own citizens. High Chancellor Vec called for order. When the chamber became quiet again, he spoke. "Admiral, even if we wanted to help these humans, how could we do it? You said yourself that the crystal ships have superior technology." Kithra had an answer ready. Dr. Zephan has been studying the ancient archives. The alliance that defeated the Crystal Plague before left detailed records of their weapons and tactics. We can use that knowledge. Ancient weapons against modern technology? The Crystal Plague has not changed. They use the same ships and tactics they used 3,000 years ago. But we have improved. Our technology is far beyond what our ancestors had. If we combine their knowledge with our capabilities, we can fight back. She changed the holographic display to show tactical information about the crystal ships. The Crystal Plague exists partially outside normal space. That is why they seem so powerful. But our ancestors learned to fight them. They discovered that certain types of weapons can hurt these entities. We can build better versions of those weapons. And if we fail? Ask Councilor Neth. If we fight and lose, what happens to the Empire? If we do nothing and let the Crystal Plague finish their harvest, they will turn their attention to us next. The ancient records are clear about this. They always eliminate advanced species after they finish with the young ones. The debate continued for hours. Some council members wanted to prepare the Empire's defenses and hoped the Crystal Plague would pass them by. Others wanted to gather intelligence and wait to see what happened to the threatened species. But a growing number of council members began to support Admiral Kithra's position. The evidence from the ancient archives was compelling. The Empire owed its existence to species that had died protecting them. Finally, High Chancellor Vec called for a vote. All those in favor of military intervention to protect threatened species from the Crystal Plague. Admiral Kithra held her breath as the council members activated their voting devices. Green lights began appearing around the chamber, indicating support for her proposal. But red lights appeared as well, showing opposition. The vote was close. Too close. The motion fails by 12 votes, High Chancellor Vec announced. The Empire will not intervene directly in the conflict with the crystal ships. Kithra felt her heart sink. She had failed. The humans and other species would die while the Empire watched from safety. But High Chancellor Vec continued speaking. However, the Council recognizes that this threat may eventually reach Imperial space. Therefore, we authorize the formation of a volunteer force to gather intelligence about the Crystal Plague and to provide limited assistance to threatened species. A volunteer force? Kithra asked. Any Imperial military personnel who wish to join this mission may do so without penalty. Any ships or equipment they take will be considered temporarily reassigned for research purposes. Admiral Kithra understood. The Council did not want to officially start a war with the Crystal Plague, but they were giving her permission to take volunteers and fight. Anyway, it was not everything she had hoped for, but it was enough. Thank you, Chancellor. I accept command of this volunteer force. As the council session ended, Admiral Kithra was approached by many officers who wanted to join her mission. Word had already spread through the Imperial military about what was happening to the young species. Captain Torres from her own ship was the first to volunteer. Admiral, my daughter is the same age as some of those human colonists who died. One cannot stand by and watch more children die. Commander Thane nodded in agreement. The Empire taught me that we fight to protect those who cannot protect themselves. That includes species beyond our borders. Dr. Zephan appeared at her side. carrying a data case filled with information from the ancient archives. "Admiral, I have found detailed technical specifications for weapons that can hurt the Crystal Plague. Our shipyards can build them if we hurry." Within 3 days, Admiral Kithera had assembled a fleet of 40 ships crewed by volunteers from across the Imperial military. They had the newest weapons technology, enhanced with knowledge from the ancient Alliance. As the volunteer fleet prepared to depart for the Sol system, Kithera received a message from High Chancellor Vec. "Admiral, the official records will show that you took unauthorized action against Council orders. But the unofficial records will show that you honored the oath our ancestors made to the dead. Good luck." The fleet jumped into hyperspace, racing to reach Earth before the Crystal Plague arrived. Admiral Kithera did not know if 40 ships would be enough to make a difference. But she knew that they had to try. In the depths of space, 3 civilizations prepared for a battle that would determine the future of the galaxy. The humans, still unaware of the threat approaching their world. The Crystal Plague, confident in their ancient mission to harvest young species. And the Empire, finally ready to repay the debt they owed to the dead. The harvest was about to begin. But this time, the young species would not face extinction alone.